Hey everyone! So for your next project, you're going to be taking some of the information that you learned in the last chapter of the book, which is using plate shots to create a levitation project. These photos or images look super fun and are a great way to tell a story or create an idea that you can't actually shoot in real life. So let's take a look. Okay, so because this is going to take some planning for the photo shoot, you do have an extra week to do this project. Now, in chapter 12, like I said, the author talked about using a plate shot, and in his example, he shot a bride on, I believe it was a staircase, and to create the beautiful lighting on the bride, he did have to use an extra light and assistant holding up the light. So in order to Photoshop that away, you need to create a plate shot, which is a shot of the exact same scene, but without the subject in there. This way you can actually use layer masks to mask away the details that you don't want in the final image. So let's take a look at a couple examples. So for this project, you can use things like objects. You can use animals or people. Now, if you decide to use an animal, it can't be an animal that already flies, okay? Yes, we're trying to make it look realistic, but we're using subjects that don't usually levitate. So, no birds or any other animal that flies, but you can use animals if you want. You can also do a combination of a person and objects. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to do this. So the first thing you need to do is come up with an idea. And I know that this can be part of, one of the hardest things, but once you have an idea, it helps direct all your other decisions. So come up with the idea first. So a couple of ways to come up with an idea is to brainstorm and think of a story, a phrase, or you can ask, what if? So let me explain what I mean. So if I'm thinking of a story, I'm thinking maybe like my example is an old woman who's walking or floating. And, how I came up with these is I just sat down and just started writing things out and just started letting my mind kind of play. So old woman walking, floating, then I'm asking myself, why is she floating? So I'm creating this story while I'm brainstorming, right? And so why is she floating? Well, one reason could be to reach her husband in the clouds. So my final idea was an old woman floating up to kiss her husband who's passed away. Now, a quick disclaimer, these ideas are my own. Come up with your own, all right? So don't take one of these ideas, come up with your own idea. All right, so phrases. Phrases are a great way because, phrases, stories from books, movies, well, maybe not so much movies because it's already been done, but you can take something a little bit further or make a play off of that, I guess. So what are some phrases? So on cloud 9, okay? That means, that you're feeling great, you're floating up in the air, that you are elated, that you're super happy. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That's a famous saying when it comes to boxing. Go float yourself, which is actually from a show called 100, where they say that as a derogatory term to throw someone out in space. Now, I can take that idea and apply it in another way. Instead of space, maybe it could be an angry shove, and a person is flying through the air. So if I did this example, though, it wouldn't be a realistic, just like, oh, they're being pushed across a room. I'd want to make it dramatic, like flying 20, 30, 40 feet up in the air, okay? Remember, we're trying to create something that cannot be captured in real life in one shot. Okay, another method is to ask yourself, what if? So for my example, what if my dog could fly? What would that look like? What would she be flying after? What would be the point of her flying? So she loves bacon treats. So my final idea is my dog flying after flying pigs. So it could be bacon treats too, but bacon, pigs, which is also, goes back to the phrase idea when pigs fly. So those are 3 different ideas that I could go with. So do that first, come up with an idea, and then that will help you along your way. So next, what you need to do is actually capture the photos. So for this to work, everything needs to be shot with the same lighting and angle of view. So you're going to shoot everything on the same day, same location. Why does this matter? Because, even if you're shooting indoors, the ambient light can change depending on the weather outside. If you're shooting outdoors, obviously the weather can change. So you want to make sure that you do some planning and decide, what is going to be floating, and make sure if you're using like multiple objects that you're shooting all of those objects in the same location on the same day. So you're going to set up your camera on a tripod. It is absolutely imperative that you use a tripod and that your camera does not move between shots, or else the Photoshop part is going to be really difficult. If you shoot everything correctly, then the Photoshopping is actually more of the easier parts of this assignment. All right, so first you're going to want to capture your background without your subject in it. This is your plate shot. This is the shot that's going to be the top layer above your other shots, so you can use a mask and mask away the areas that you want to be showing or you don't want to be showing. Next, you're going to not move your camera, okay, and capture your subject with, if you have objects also, they could be, lying on the ground, or you can have someone holding them up in the particular position. But you want to be, like I said, in the same scene, same location, same lighting, same angle of view. And when I mean angle of view, I mean same lens. Okay, don't zoom in, don't zoom out, the same millimeters. You want everything to work out right, because if you've taken some other photo classes, you know that if you use like a wide angle lens, you're going to get a different distortion than if you use a telephoto lens. So you want to be using the same lens. Don't move your camera, don't change your lens, don't change your aperture settings. You want everything to stay the same. Okay. Now if you're photographing a person, have them sit or lay or whatever on a chair, stool, and direct them to pose as if they're floating, because you're going to use that plate shot later on to cover up whatever they're sitting on, so they look like they're floating in the air. And I would recommend shooting extra poses. You never know, you might get into Photoshop and be like, oh, I want something to be a little bit different. So if that's the case, shoot extra poses while you have everything set up. Take a whole bunch of photos. It's always better to have more than be stuck in Photoshop not having the shot you actually needed. Okay, so once you get the photos, you need to start the Photoshop work. And if you're not sure, go back to chapter 12. He really goes step by step on how he does this, and this is exactly what you need to do also. So first you want to open your images and do any corrective edits in ACR or Photoshop. And so, and what I mean by corrective edits is, if you need to change the white balance, the contrast, the exposure, but make sure that you're applying the same edits to all of the photos you're going to be putting together. This will keep everything looking consistent. Now you're going to combine these images in Photoshop and remove parts by using masks. And I want you guys to name your layers so I can see exactly what you did. Next, you're going to add depth and shadows where needed. So if, you photographed, a book that's supposed to be flying in the air and someone was holding it up, but maybe they were blocking the shadow or something, add some shadow to the floor, to the wall, to whatever, so that it looks more realistic. So I really want you guys to be paying attention to light and shadow and how these things are working in real life, so you can apply them into your image in Photoshop. And once you have all that figured out, you're going to apply filters or any other effects you think would enhance the image. Some ideas are using color grading. You can go back to that lecture and think about the different colors and what kind of emotions they evoke and how using color can enhance your project. Another thing you could do is some subtle texture. Doing a texture photo as the top layer and then decreasing the opacity to kind of bring it all together. And don't be afraid to try something new and then throw it out, okay? Sometimes we learn best from our mistakes. So for example, here is some color grading applied to a levitation image. So, they photographed the person probably laying on the couch with their legs up. And here's another important point. Photograph the clothing. So if you're using a person, you're going to want to have them photograph their clothing moving in different ways. So this shot may have been, the photographer had the person stand and kind of fluff out their skirt. And then you take it and turn it and then add some shadows, light and shadows, so that it matches the light and shadows in the final image. So yeah, think about that. If there's clothing involved, what would clothing look like if it's floating or falling down off of a levitating person like this? And then they use, some color grading. This has some really beautiful oranges. It looks like maybe some purples or magentas in the shadows, and this really great use of light and these, little glittery effects and such. All right, guys. So like I said, you have 2 weeks to do this project, because I know that you're going to need probably 1 week to, get everything planned out for the photo shoot, and then actual time to work with it. All right, guys. I can't wait to see what you create.